Hey guys, what's up? Cards here, bringing you a video from Draft Day Sports College Basketball 2020 by Wolverine Studios. Great maker of games for sports sims, all your college professional basketball and football needs, as well as a great golf game. So, if you haven't checked it out yet, check out some Draft Day Sports College Basketball 2020 with me today. What I want to bring you today is an overview of the way to get yourself set up with your coach, your strategy, your practice plans, so that you can successfully move forward on your quest to win the national championship or whatever your goal is in this game. Sort of leads me to my disclaimer right at the beginning. Sports sims are great because everybody can play them however they like. Whether you want to jump in here like I did with the Louisville Cardinals and a coach with perfect skills and try to win that championship right out of the gate. I know there's a lot of people that are going to want to start off with rookie coaches, start off with those small schools, work their way up. It's all great. So what I'm going to bring you today is the way that I've played it. This is a way that will work. I also want to give you a lot of things to think about as you go through, but it is certainly not the only way. There's 1,000 ways to play these games. So I hope that this gives you some ideas to think about and move forward and really perfect the way that you play the game. So here we are on sort of a home screen, I guess, if you will, if there is one in this game. This is your office. This is my head coach that I've created. This is a brand new dynasty that I started just for the purposes of making this video. I haven't progressed a single day at all or done anything other than create the coach and create the save, basically. So the first thing, other than naming your coach, giving him an age and a picture and all that good stuff, the first thing that you're going to end up doing is these skills down here. You can give yourself a number of different skill levels. There's some presets with preset point values, and then within those presets you can adjust those point values. Obviously the point total stays the same, so it might give you 150 points at a given level, and you can pick and choose. If you want to have, maybe you're looking for a defensive powerhouse and you want to focus a little bit more on defensive skills and player development, or you just want to go out there and beat everybody at the recruiting game. However you want to set it up, you can do that at various levels. Now there's your current level, and then you also can set a maximum level. So as long as your maximum level is higher than your current level, your coach will progress each year. And you can set both of those anywhere you want. If you want to set yourself at the very most rookie green coach possible, and then put your upper limit at all hundreds like this coach here, or anything in between. It's really totally up to you. Just be aware when you're doing this. If there's 3 different modes in this game. There's a challenge mode, there's sandbox mode, and there's a multiplayer mode. If you're playing a multiplayer online league, your skill levels are probably going to be capped somehow by that league, but you can pick any team that you want, so it's not an issue. Sandbox mode, you can do whatever you want, it's not going to be an issue. If you're playing in the challenge mode, it can be an issue. If you're playing challenge mode and you select a very young, unskilled coach, age doesn't necessarily matter, but skills definitely do. If you're an unskilled coach in the challenge mode, you are not going to be able to walk in and be the head coach at Louisville or Kentucky or Duke or Michigan State. Those schools aren't going to accept you. Every school in the game will offer you a job, but if you want to be at a UCLA or a Kansas, they're probably going to offer you third assistant, maybe second assistant. They might put you in charge of scouting or running practice or something of that nature. So if you want to walk straight in and take over one of these blue blood programs, you're going to need to have yourself a pretty good coach that's capable of taking that over from day one, or else they're not even going to offer you that job. So just something to think about as you create your coach. After that, we want to move over here and look at these philosophies. Now, some of these philosophies are going to be more or less important depending on how you play. The way that I play, I like to simulate every game. I like to simulate years and years and get 30, 40 years into the future and see if I can turn myself into a Hall of Fame coach with 1,000 wins and a dozen championships. So the way that I set these philosophies is going to have an effect on how the AI runs my games. if you're actually going in and coaching the games, some of these, like defensive intensity and offensive pace, your philosophies can set up a preset. So like if my offensive pace is up here, that's probably around a 7 or 8. When you go into the game, your offensive pace is going to be set at like a 7 or 8. But throughout the course of the game, you get 5 minutes left and you're up by 20, you can scale that down and just slow it down and take the air out of the ball. So they are just things to consider as you move forward, totally dependent on how you play the game. Player preference, I think that's pretty understandable. I'm at a higher profile program. I expect to be going after higher caliber recruits, so I'm going to tend a little toward youth, but not too much. I do still like to have veterans out there. Player rotation, I'm sort of right in the middle. 8-9 guys is good for me. Offensive pace, I set it pretty high. As far as that goes, that's really just how quick into your offense you're taking a shot. If you want to run one of these more complex offenses like a Princeton and you think you might want to be taking it deep into the shot clock, you might want to slow this down. I keep it a little bit faster just because of the program I'm at, the athletes I intend to put on the floor, all those things, I take that into consideration. But this whole game, it's all about having a plan and tailoring every aspect of everything you do towards that plan. So moving on down here, offensive crash boards. Obviously, these skills are all self-explanatory, but the more that you crash those offensive boards, the more that you're going to allow the other team to get fast break opportunities. So you need to keep that in mind when you're setting this. I keep that kind of middling, but it's up to you and your play style. Defensive intensity, I like to have it high. The higher you have it set, you're going to get more steals. You're also going to get more fouls. The lower you get it, the opposite of that is true. I would advise against getting it too low. In previous versions of this game, I tried having my defensive intensity set all the way down here, and the other teams were consistently scoring in the 90s and 100s. Now that was a relatively small sample size, so maybe that wouldn't always be the case, but I would highly advise you to bump that defensive intensity up at least a little bit. Defensive crash boards, it's going to be kind of the opposite of the offensive crash boards. If you're crashing the defensive boards, you're going to get more defensive rebounds. You're also going to have less opportunities for your own team to create fast breaks. Full court defense, this is just how often you're running a full court defense. If you want to be that Arkansas team of the early mid-90s, you want to bump that way up here. If you want to bring it on down here, maybe you're just putting it on to try to surprise them and create a turnover here and there. Maybe it's just situational. And then obviously zone defense, this is just how often you're telling the AI to run your zone. So next we want to jump over here and start creating our strategies. So here is our strategy screen. There's a couple of things here. This is our man-to-man offensive set usage. If we're going against a man defense, this is the offense you're going to run. You can see there isn't anything for zone offense. How the AI is going to work in this game is it's automatically going to select the correct zone offense to attack the zone defense. So if the other team is running a 2-3 against you, you're automatically going to run your 2-3 zone offense. You don't have to worry about that. Over here on defense, our basic defensive set usage, you can see here where it's set to 90% man-to-man, 10% 1-3-1 zone. That's only in the half court. When you come down here, like say I want to set my full court man to 100. Oh, I got to set this to 0 first. If you ever run into that problem where the game's not taken, it's because you're trying to go above 100%. So get rid of that first, get rid of the value you want to drop, and then you increase the other. So if I say that I want to run 100% full court man-to-man, that does not mean that I'm going to run a full court man-to-man every single possession. This is just 100% of the time that my team runs full court, it's going to be man-to-man as opposed to any of these other zone presses. So that's how those percentages work. Now, what I will say as far as what you're running, run what, play it the way that you want to. Run the offenses that you want to. If you want to win early, when you come in and take over a new team, I would suggest that you get to the offense you want to run over the course of a couple of years. Here's the issue. You can see right here, I haven't said anything on this, so this team was running a heavy dose of triangle. a bit of shuffle, and then some 5 out. If I come and look at my team, and let's look at one of the seniors. Let's look at a decent scholarship senior here, this small forward Jim Bills. Look at his proficiency in those 3 offenses. He knows what he's doing if he's running triangle, 5 out, or shuffle. If we decide, hey, my offensive philosophy is I run a flex or motion and flex, well, he's no better than a freshman at that. So you really don't want to be doing that with these guys as seniors, because you're going to lose all of the advantage that you've gained over training these offenses for 4 years. The better that the players are at the offenses that you're running, I know they're going to get less turnovers. To me, I also think that they're going to create more opportunities to score. So if I were coming in here and I wanted to move into a motion or a flex or something like that, I would definitely recommend doing that slowly. The first year, I would still run heavy what they're doing, and then slowly transition over a period of time into what you really want to do. You don't have to, but I promise you, I learned that the hard way. I previously had a dynasty with Stanford, I believe, and I came in my first year. They expected me to make the Sweet 16 and all these other lofty aspirations, and I looked at the roster and I thought, yeah, no problem. And I totally bombed because I tried to force my offense on a team that did not know how to run it. So do whatever you would like, but that's my advice to you for today. Also think about when you're setting these up whether you're going to have seniors or freshmen playing more often. If you run like Kentucky and you're getting the top recruiting class every year and you're playing 4 or 5 freshmen at a time, they're not going to be great at any of these offenses. So some of the offenses, like maybe motion, is going to be a little bit more general. Maybe 5 out, if you like to shoot, is a little bit more general. So you may want to consider some of those. If you're running at a very small school, you might want to think about a Princeton offense. If you look at this offensive set description for Princeton, it's going to show you a good passing center is crucial, as well as trained players making good cuts. You need to have players that know how to run that Princeton offense to really make it succeed. So if you're going to have a junior and senior heavy roster, you can look at a Princeton offense. But if you're Duke, if you're Kentucky, or teams that like to operate that way, you probably can't run that offense. So take into consideration what kind of players you're going to be putting on the floor when you're deciding your offensive set usage. Also, along with that, you can change the percentage of offensive set usage. So say that you are that Kentucky team and you've got 5 freshmen out there that really don't know any of these offenses. Well, maybe you're running 100% motion or 50% motion and 50% 5 out, however you break it down. This is the percentage of the time that you're going to run that offensive set when you choose to run an offensive set. But right here, this is telling my guys we're really only running offensive sets about 50% of the time. The rest of the time, you can feel free to create for yourself, and the players are going to lean more into their tendencies. And if you've got freshmen that aren't well versed in any of these offenses, that's going to give them the freedom to go out and create points and create offense on their own. So just there's 1,000 things to consider, and that's one more of them. Also, don't forget about your offensive focus. You can go heavy or favor the inside, and then the same thing here on the outside. Obviously, if you've got a team full of shooters and you're running a 5 out, you probably want to at least favor the outside, if not go heavy. I don't tend to do that too often because I tend to have more traditional big men. I like to run motion and triangle, so I'll tend to go either balanced, or if I just have some dominant big men, I'll start favoring the inside or even go heavy on the inside. That's going to depend on my roster. So once I get set up and going, once my team knows the offenses I'm running, I usually don't play around too much with the offensive set usage. What I will change year to year is my offensive focus and my offensive set usage based on, is my talent on the inside or is it on the outside, and do I have experienced players that know my offense or do I not? Now, that's the way I do it because, again, I'm playing in bulk. I'm simulating a game every 5 minutes. I'm not going in and tinkering with things every single game. You can, however, go in and change your strategy game to game if that's the way that you're playing. So it may be that your team knows motion and 5 out, whatever it is, and you get into a situation where you think one or the other of those offenses is going to be more successful. You can go in and change this every single game if you'd like. It's just up to you and how much time you're spending and how much time you're putting into this strategy page. So we can walk through the offensive sets a little bit here. The motion's just the basic set. I tend to run this a lot. You can see it's going to keep your primary post players around the lane, allow guards and small forwards to roam the outside or cut to the basket. To me, this is just a traditional offense, nothing fancy. The reason that I really like to run it is because I do tend toward younger players. I see a lot of the incoming freshmen that already know some of the motion offense. None of them are great. It's just like the player that I showed you a minute ago, the senior who did have a little bit of experience with the motion that was probably coming out of high school. A lot of high schoolers have a little bit of experience with the motion. So to me, they're going to already have a head start if I'm running that offense. So I like to run that because I do tend to have at least one freshman and definitely a sophomore on every starting roster just about once I get going into my league. So that's a personal preference for me. The next offense is the flex. You can see here this one's going to require all 5 players to be good ball handlers and passers. So it's going to get you easy shots if you have the players for it. The high post here, it's going to draw the opposing big men away from the basket and try to let your swing men have opportunities to post up. But the downside, your big players are out of position for offensive rebounds. So this, if in your philosophy, you say, well, we really want to crash the offensive boards, this probably is not the offense for you. You might want to back off of that. Also, if you want to run this offense, you're going to want to look for shooting guards and small forwards that know how to score in the post, because that's where it's trying to put them into a position to score. So those are my suggestions as far as the high post goes. Shuffle, just guards comfortable in the post. You're going to look for the same skill set out of those guards. And I would even look for it in those small forwards because sometimes I like to move them down to the 2 guard. But it's not overly complex. Princeton, we already touched on it. This is an offense, in my opinion, this is for small prestige schools that are going to have a lot of juniors and seniors. If you can move up to a bigger prestige school and you're going heavy on the veterans, you're going to have even more talent than those small schools. But if you know you're going to have veterans, this might be a great advantage for you. Triangle is another pretty basic offense. It's traditional, big guys around the basket, guards on the outside. Again, that's why I like to run it. It's not getting too fancy. I'm not having to be put into a box of what I'm looking at when I'm recruiting. I like to go for those, highly talented players, sort of regardless of the exact skill set. But if you're a little bit lower in prestige, you might want to look at one of the other offenses that focus more on a skill set, and those skill sets will increase the advantage of your given offense. And then the last is the 5 out, good perimeter players at every position, outside shots. If you're wanting to play the 3 ball, go with the 5 out. As far as all of these go, I generally like to have my team be able to run at least 2 of them, if not 3. That's one of those things that's going to depend. If you've got a coach that is a very good offensive skill coach, then maybe you can add in a couple more offenses. If you're not that great at teaching offense, you might want to just focus on 1 or 2. So think about all of those things certainly when you're setting up your strategy. So once you know what your coach looks like, once you know your strategy, then we need to move on to a practice plan. So to set up our practice plan, we're going to come right down here in the corner. And here is our practice plan. I've actually cleared it, so all of the presets are gone. So, very first thing, most important thing when you set up a practice plan, I can give you a real quick demonstration. I'm going to come in here and tell them I want to run I want to practice my motion offense 40% of the time. But I don't remember how often I was using that. Let me bounce back over to strategy. Not actually running motion. And I mean, I knew that. But I come back in here to practice plan, it's gone. It does not save unless you hit this save change button. I cannot tell you how many times I've come in and set up a practice plan, forgot to save my changes, and it's all just gone, and I can't figure out why my team isn't performing as well as it should be. So when you come in and set up your practice plan, when you're done, save those changes, or else you just wasted all that time. So a couple of considerations here on the practice plan. Just base it on how often you're running that set. If I'm running triangle 75% and shuffle, with this, I want to keep the percentage of time that I'm working on them within a ratio of my usage. Sort of the way that I'll normally do that, I'll come through and set up my zone attacks, and again, I keep these steady throughout the entire season. If you're a player that changes things week to week, if you're running motion and flex and you decide this week we're going motion against this team, maybe you want to use all of the practice time on motion. If you're going against a 2-3 zone attack, maybe you push all of it over there. I like to keep the same plan once I get it in motion, indefinite. So I come through and I just set all 3 of these up to 10%. You could probably get away with 5% on all 3 of these if you have more of a veteran team. If you're playing younger players, I would recommend a little bit higher. I'm a big stickler for having my players know how to attack a zone defense, because I played for a number of years in I think it's the Horizon League, and Chicago State just beat everyone to death with a 1-3-1 zone, and nobody knew how to attack it. So really like to have my players know how to run that. I like to come over, get about 20%. I would normally have my man-to-man set at about 80 and my zone set around 20, so I would usually go like 20 and 5, maybe 20 and 10, get 5 or 10% over here. So I got about 30% here, about 30% here, and then we could drop another 40% in wherever we would like over here on the sets that we want to be running. Here's another part where you might want to consider youth versus experience. If you've got a young team, if you're running out all those freshmen, maybe you just want to focus on one offense, at least early in the year, and really get them to know that offense as you go, and then you can add in that second offense at the end of the year. Conversely, you move into a new program and you tried running their offense and they just did not have the players, and it's coming down the stretch and it's going nowhere. You might decide, this is a lost cause. We're ditching those old offenses. We're going in and doing what I want. And at the end of the year, you can really push and have them start learning your new offense to get a head start on next year. So all of those things, just keep them in mind and make sure that it fits your overall pattern. Last thing that I want to talk about is our depth chart. So when I come through into a depth chart, I like to, I say clear it out, but I just set up the starters to play 40 minutes on each line, because I don't want to miss it. A lot of times they'll flip-flop and have a power forward playing center or something of that nature, and not that there's anything wrong with that. I just don't want to miss it and miss, not have them set up the way that I would prefer to have them set up. This is another thing that's going to change in importance based on how you play. If you are playing out your games, you're the coach, you don't have to worry about this as much, because you're going to be in there and you can affect your substitutions throughout the game. You don't have to stick to this. But if you're like me and you're simulating these games, this is going to give the AI an idea of how you'd like to see the minutes go throughout the course of the game. So the first thing that I would do, obviously, is come through and see who do I want starting and who are going to be my main backups. So in a situation like this, this team's got an awesome small forward. He might just play the entire game. I can come through here and say this shooting guard is probably going to be my main guard as far as a backup goes. So maybe he comes in and plays the point here and over here, and then he's going to switch over and play shooting guard in here. And that way he's playing, you can see here, 16 minutes a game. My starters are both playing 32 minutes a game. The starters get these little 4-minute stretches out of a break. He plays 8 minutes straight each half. Well, that's going to keep the starters well rested. That's going to get him enough time to get in, get into the flow of the game, that sort of thing. What I will say as far as these depth charts go, These just give your coaches an idea of what you'd like to see. They're not definite. If somebody gets in foul trouble, you're going to see these things vary. So just because you say you want Warner playing 32 minutes a game, if he gets into foul trouble, you're going to see games where he only plays 22 minutes, 25 minutes. So this isn't a hard and fast rule. It's not going to be this way every time. The AI will make smart decisions based on the circumstance. This is just telling it what you want to see happen. Now, if you don't want to spend all of your time in here fine-tuning this, you can always come up here and either AI suggest all or AI suggest matrix. The difference between these, if I choose AI suggest all, it's going to redo the depth chart as well as all of the minutes. So, of course, this is horrid. You would never actually do this. But let's say I'm going to put all my worst players in, because I'm a terrible coach. We'll leave him in. He's not very good to begin with. If I leave that in and hit AI suggest matrix, it's going to give me just that. Here, if these are the guys that you want to play, this is how the AI suggests divvying up the minutes. If you want the AI to determine both your depth chart and minutes, that's when you're going to use AI suggest all, and this is what it's going to give me. So the other thing you want to take into consideration, if you're going to be setting it up manually, make sure you're taking into consideration everything you've looked at already. Are you playing freshmen? Are you playing seniors? Are you playing a specific offense? If I'm running Princeton at a small school and I've got a pretty talented shooting guard who might be 3 stars and my starting senior is only 2 stars or 2.5 stars, I might still want to start that senior that knows how to run the offense instead of the freshman. So take into consideration what you're running, how much experience you need, because it will make a difference. And then also, don't forget about your players that are demanding playing time. If we come in here and set up something like this, I honestly didn't look too closely at this roster before I started this video, but let's just say, for example, pretend Nicholson here. He's a 1.5 star power forward. The other power forwards on my roster, 1.5 star, and they're actually playing as center up here. Anyway, let's say Nicholson is my power forward of the future. If he's got a high expectations of minutes, if he wants solid minutes, you've got to take it into consideration. You don't have to give him the minutes, but keep in mind, if you don't, it's going to make him angry and he's going to transfer out pretty quickly. So if you want to keep those guys happy, you've got to give them the minutes. That's something you need to keep an eye on when you're recruiting. If you don't have the playing time, you probably don't want to bring in players that have a high desire for playing time, because they will transfer out. I've seen it more in this new 2020 version of this game than any prior version. So just make sure that you're paying attention. If you got players that want to play, you better find a way to get them on the court, whether that's playing out of position or doing like I did and having them have a backup play a couple of different positions. Just make sure that you're getting them the minutes that they're looking for. So that's how I go about setting up my strategy. That's how I set up my coach. That's what I tell them to run. That's how I get the practices together. And then here, the last step is actually getting the players on the floor. So I really hope that everybody picks up something from this video. Again, this isn't the only way to do it, but it is a way to do it, and it's certainly a lot of things that you need to take into consideration, and you got to have that all rattling around inside of your brain when you're making up your plan as to how you're going to attack a season in Draft Day Sports College Basketball 2020. So I hope you guys liked the video, and I will see you next time.